welcome. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me with you today. Yeah, really excited to talk to the group here about some of the exciting opportunities that we've got coming through for decarbonising other parts of the city, but also really importantly supporting the voluntary community social enterprise sector to reduce their running costs and play their part in addressing the climate emergency. So I'm James Stirling. I'm the communications and social value manager for Bristol City Leap. What is Bristol City Leap? You're probably asking yourselves. I will walk through some of that briefly before we get on to the talk about the fund, but I'm going to start with a quick video, which will give you hopefully some insight into who we are and what we do in the city. I hope this works.
Bristol City Council, Amoresco and Vattenfall have joined forces in a world-first partnership to support the city on its journey to become carbon neutral by 2030. This transformational partnership will bring over £1 billion of investment into Bristol over the next 20 years. During the first 5 years, there will be a significant expansion of Bristol's heat network, essential upgrades to public sector buildings, and residential improvements, offering greater energy efficiency alongside reliable, low-carbon heat and electricity from sustainable sources. Bristol City Leap is committed to creating over 1,000 new jobs, apprenticeships and work placements, and investing £1.5 million into community-owned energy projects. Bristol is just the start. We want to inspire the delivery of similar initiatives across the UK and elsewhere, all over the world. So, if you're a community member with a project idea, a business that needs support with carbon reduction, or an organisation that can help us deliver for Bristol, please get in touch.
So there you go. That is Bristol City Leap in a nutshell. My team pulled this video together, and I often joke and say it does a wonderful job of stealing my thunder in terms of the intro and the origin story of Bristol City Leap. But I think it's a really good, quick way of outlining who we are. So just to recap on that, and there's not going to be a quiz, don't worry. Bristol City Leap, in essence, is a new approach towards decarbonisation at a city scale. So it's about doing lots and lots of energy and infrastructure projects to reduce carbon emissions for a city, but doing all of those things in concert together. So bringing all of those different technologies together to make sure that the greatest benefits can be achieved, not just in terms of the greatest level of carbon reduction, but also the benefits that come for communities and the people that live in our city. So we're pretty agnostic. We focus on a range of technologies. We look across large-scale renewables, so wind turbines and solar panels, and fields full of solar panels in the fullness of time, but also the kind of really important things that matter to ordinary residents in the city. So energy efficiency works, the likes of insulating homes, putting in new heating systems which are more efficient, and importantly, really save people money. That's a huge, huge priority for us, particularly in, the current cost of living crisis, and certainly kind of other challenges that are coming down the tracks as well. It builds on a lot of experience and lots of great work that goes on within the city. Bristol is really not just nationally, but internationally considered a very much a climate leader. So we've made some really good progress as a city. So just some stats here as a bit of context: 42% reduction across all of carbon emissions in Bristol since 2005. That's when the initial baseline was set. So a good bit of progress has been done there. Bristol City Council, as a kind of leading local authority in sort of climate action, has reduced its carbon emissions by over 80% now since 2005. So the remaining kind of 20% is something that Bristol City Leap will come in and support them in doing. And it's actually the hardest percentage as well. So the last 20% is the most tricky, but we will do it. And obviously, I'm sure many of you know, Bristol was the first city to declare a climate emergency, and that's been followed now by, I think, over 200 other local authorities, cities, towns, and regions across the country. So really, really kind of set the standard and started a really important trend for the country. And Bristol City Leap supports all of that. So we support not just the local decarbonisation targets, but also the national kind of net zero targets that are set by central government. We launched in January last year, 2023. And when we launched our 20-year partnership, we set out a number of kind of key commitments around the first 5 years. So I'm going to run through a couple of those. But primarily, this is about the sort of level of investment that we bring to the city and the level of delivery. So we committed to obviously £1 billion worth of delivery over the 20-year period of the partnership, but within the first 5 years alone, at least 424 million. And all of that is about kind of, putting money into projects like building large-scale wind turbines, building out the heat network, doing those important kind of social housing decarbonisation pieces across the city, and bringing all of those 28,000 properties that are tenanted up to a good standard of energy efficiency. We say an EPC rating of C or higher. But for sort of industry standard, that's pretty good. We find that a lot of the properties in the city are currently kind of E's and F's at the moment, which are very, very inefficient and cost people a lot of money, very hard to heat, also quite unhealthy in terms of the damp and the mold and the ventilation that comes with it. We have a commitment, obviously, around decarbonising the council's estate as well. So as I said, doing that last 20%, and that's by 2025, which is not very far off now. But we're making some really good progress there. But one of our primary commitments outside of kind of the energy side of things is around social value. So we've committed to £61.5 million worth of social value in our first 5 years. And social value is kind of a niche term, but I think in essence, what social value means is whilst we're doing that important work to decarbonise the city and build all of these assets and widgets and wind turbines and everything that goes with it, it's about the stuff that we can do for the betterment of society. So how do we improve the lives of local people? How do we bring community investment in? How do we create jobs? How do we support people to earn a fair wage? So we have some social value kind of commitments as well. And some of that, as I say, is around community funding. One of the key things for us really is around the real living wage. So we are committed that not just sort of my team and the people in Bristol City Leap as an organisation, but also our wider supply chain. So anyone that's working on a project for us, digging a hole in a road, or drilling a hole in a wall, or putting some insulation or a solar panel on a roof, all of those people must be paid at least a real living wage. So that's a fair wage for for really, really important work, and that's a prerequisite to work with us essentially. And then we've got lots and lots of different types of funding that we're pulling through the city at the moment. The one I'm going to talk to you about today is the Community Energy Fund, which has obviously got a very big focus on kind of energy projects, but is also something that we want to be accessible to community organisations across the city. So the Bristol City Leap Community Energy Fund. So we launched in November last year. It is a fund that we've pulled together really to support energy development projects for community organisations in the city. It's open to anyone that we can consider to be a VCSE organisation. So it can be a charity, it could be a faith group, it could be a tenant association, it could be a CIC, it could be a social enterprise of any type of community organisation. And the idea behind it is that we make this accessible. So we've got lots of very, very active community energy groups within the city who do a fantastic job of pulling projects together. What we really want to see is the other side of the VCSE sector coming forward and accessing that funding in order to do their own energy projects. And it's a daunting thing. I talk to a lot of community organisations who, energy is not their specialty. It's not something that, it's very niche, I think it's fair to say. We want to make it accessible. We want to make it something that's fully supported so that people can access that funding and, importantly, reduce their energy consumption, save money on their running costs wherever possible, but also bring the communities along on that journey with us. So Um, it's got obviously some key aims around reduction in fossil fuels. That's really important to us. It's also really important that we share this across communities within Bristol. Um, how it works. So, as I say, it's about any sort of VCSE organisations that are based within Bristol. Um, it can cover really any type of project that's got an energy theme around it. So anything we could be deemed to reduce carbon emissions or reduce our reliance on fuel poverty. So it can be from actual infrastructure projects like putting solar panels on a community centre. It can be educational behavioural change programs. So pulling together, your members or your clients or your service users, or even partners to do, an important workshop around kind of energy management in the home, or how to cut your energy bills, or how to switch to a different energy supply, that sort of thing. And then it can also be, yeah, as I say, sort of bigger kind of infrastructural things like solar, wind, a new heating system, battery storage, or important kind of energy efficiency. One thing I'm really keen to see as well is an arts project. We've not had any applications through so far for an energy arts project. So if there are any budding artists out there among you, please do, yeah, have a think about that. And yeah, we're happy to have a chat as well about the type of thing that could happen. As I said, we also want this to be fully supported. So we've got an organisation called Bristol Energy Network working with us, who are a community umbrella organisation across the city. And their role in this is to help us to support community organisations with their applications. So we're, acutely aware that there are a lot of groups out there that have never submitted an application for community energy funding, may have never submitted an application for any funding in the past. And so we've got that support mechanism to help you with writing your application, putting in all the necessary information that needs to be included, and making sure you have the best chance to access that funding. And importantly, also where funding applications are, denied, to give important feedback to those organisations so that they can reapply for the next round of funding. And what we've got available are various kind of series of grants of different sizes, and some loans that we've just launched actually in the last couple of months. So I'm going to talk through what the breakdown of those are. So the idea is that there's a funding pot available to you, depending on the scale of your project or the scale of your ambition, really. So the idea is that you can come into the fund at a very early stage for a small amount of funding, get access to that, do the feasibility, do the kind of planning that you need to do, and then come back into the fund at a lower level potentially to get to access more funding. So we want to be, this is kind of a circular thing in that we want people to come in and out of the fund, accessing the funding that they need in order to make those projects kind of really run as far as they can. So we've got something called micro grants, which are up to £1,000. Those are intended to be kind of very nimble, very fleet of foot, in that, you can kind of put in an application for a micro grant. The funding can be with you within a matter of weeks, really. So the idea is to access that quick funding, do the early kind of feasibility, could be a survey, could be, a quick study, whatever you need to do in order to kind of write a fuller application for more funding down the line. And then we get to small grants, which are between £1,000 and £5,000. And the idea for that is you've done the kind of early checks. This is about doing some deeper testing, perhaps a more detailed feasibility study. And it can also cover some of those capital costs as well. So if there's, staff time or sort of resources that are needed, it can cover up to 25% of those capital costs. And then development grants, which range from £10,000 to £50,000. That's more around the kind of very detailed business case development, and getting access to further capital costs to progress the project on. And then we have loans, and the loans are from between 25 and £50,000. These are 0% interest loans, deliberately set in that way so that they're accessible. I think loans can be quite daunting sometimes for anyone, but particularly for sort of community organisations. And so what we have is a kind of no obligation on those loans in terms of payback. So they're designed really that if your project is a roaring success and actually turns out to be profitable, you can repay that loan, obviously with the profits that come from it, and that funding will go back into the loans pot to pay other future loans and other projects going forward from the fund. If, however, for whatever reason, circumstances or otherwise, it's not a project that's as successful as it may have looked on paper and on study, there is no obligation. So we're not going to come after you and kind of hassle you for repayments. We're there to kind of support and be a catalyst for the development of your projects, really. So those are the kind of the breakdowns of the grants. As I say, we've got ourselves and organisations that can talk through that in more detail with lots of information on the website as well. Um, and then really, I suppose, how is the funding delivered? Via big check. So we will bring you a big check. No, in all seriousness, we aim to get the funding to you as quickly as possible. As I say, the micro grants are very, very kind of quick and easy. So they're kind of, a quick decision from myself and my team, and we get the funding out, as soon as possible. For the larger grants and loans, they run on a kind of 6 month cycle. So we've just closed a funding round in the last couple of days, actually, and we've got our decision panel next week. Um, After that, we've then got another decision panel in kind of about 5 or 6 months' time. So it's a rolling fund. It's always open. As soon as one round closes, the next one opens. So there is ample opportunity to get involved. And then, obviously, if successful in your funding application, we are there to work with you and support and advise on the next stages of your project, but also really there to kind of do I guess banging the drum really about your organization, and about the potential for your project. So we're very, very keen to kind of get out and talk about the wonderful range of projects that are coming through. And we've seen some really, really interesting ones so far. These are just a handful, and then we've got, I think, another 25 or more, or so to kind of review next Tuesday, which is fantastic, and all of a larger kind of range really. So yeah, that's an overview of the fund. What I thought would be really, really good before we take some questions is to hand over to Isabel from Windmill Hill City Farm, who we've worked really closely with, and has actually recently been a successful applicant. In fact, that's Isabel in the top right there. Sorry, Isabel. So I'm going to hand over to Isabel on that note. But yeah, thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions shortly. Stop sharing.
Sorry, let me just grab my slides. Does that look okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I thought I'd start by giving a little bit of background about Windmill Hill City Farm. So I'm sure some of you might have visited us. I'm one of the two fundraising managers. So there's myself and Helen Baines. We do a job share. You may have come across Helen. So we're in Bedminster in South Bristol, and we're on council land that the council has had kind of destined to become a lorry park in the 70s, and a group of really committed residents came together to try and stop that happening. They had their first meeting, I think, in 1975, and we've been a charity since something like 1979, so almost 50 years. We're the first city farm outside of London, and we currently have a long-term lease from the council. So we're a 4.5-acre site, and we're a charity. We have lots of different kind of facilities and services on the site. So just to give you a snapshot of what we have here. So we're a working farm. We have sheep, cows, pigs, chickens, ducks, rabbits, guinea pigs, lots of different animals. We have a productive garden growing fruit and vegetables and herbs and flowers. We have an amazing cafe serving sustainable, healthy food. So we only serve our own meat that we produce on the farm. We have lots of community rooms, and I'm sure many of you have been for meetings here. And we also have long-term tenants. We have an outdoor theatre that we built a couple of years ago. And we have play areas, a football pitch, a sauna, 2 pottery studios, and yeah, lots of different activities, which makes it a great place to work. I'm just helping with the hay and straw delivery, so I've probably covered in hay and straw. in terms of services, so we have an outdoor learning program. So we have around over 3,000 school children, primary school children, visiting each year. And we do lots of school workshops linked to the curriculum. So trying to bring to life topics around food and farming and the environment, things like life cycles of plants and animals. We also do smaller nurture groups and one-to-one sessions for children who might kind of struggle in the classroom environment. Another large program is our health and social care program. So we work with 250 volunteers, all with kind of different mental health needs or wellbeing needs. And we do kind of different levels of volunteering, but they're all around animal care and gardening. We have an early years nursery where we have 132 children coming each week. And we have monthly markets, events, yoga. We have 130 staff on site. And we think that in the last year, we've had something like 200,000 separate visits and served over 41,000 meals in the cafe. So there's a lot going on here. And I thought because we're a fundraising group, you'd be interested in our income. So just to give you a sense of kind of how big we are financially. So our turnover is around 2.4 million. And we earn 88% of our income. So we make around 1.2 million from the nursery, and then another 650,000 from our cafe and room hire. And then we have various other small income streams. And there's Helen, myself, and Steve, our CEO, who I'm sure many of you know as well. We raise about 300,000 or 400,000 a year mainly through trusts and foundations. And we have a small individual giving program. So yeah, we did experience a bit of a loss last year, like many charities did. So we're working hard to try and make that up. Okay, so just that gave you kind of a sense of our size. When the City Leap fund, the Community Energy Fund came out, we immediately applied for a micro grant. We actually have the district heat network is coming through our sites. So Vattenfall, who are also one of the sort of co-founders of the City Leap initiative, they are installing the district heat network. And I think the idea is that they could connect some of our buildings onto it directly, which would link us up to more renewable, like lower carbon energy and reduce some of our heating bills. So through our grant, we really wanted to start exploring how we could connect up, because on site we have like 7 buildings, we have 6 different boilers. There's a lot, it's kind of a mishmash of energy kind of solutions that have been developed as we've gone along. So the micro grant was to start thinking about that. So it was for staff time. It's just £1,000, but it meant that we could put a brief together for a scoping exercise to see how we could connect to the district heat network. It basically allowed us some thinking time that was paid for, which is very helpful. And then in the current round, we've applied for 2 projects. We only realised 3 days before the deadline that we could apply for 2 different projects at the same time. So the first one we did was kind of extending the work of the micro grant. So a small grant of £5,000 to work with a company to undertake an options appraisal. So I'm still getting my head around all these different things, but basically we're looking at which kind of low carbon technology would be best for each of our 7 buildings. So it's not necessarily going to be the district heat network. It might be solar or an air-to-air heat pump, but we need some like professional support so we can get to that stage. So the idea is that we'll do this company will do a cost benefit analysis of the different options to help build that business case of whether we can connect to the district heat network, because it's going to be quite expensive. And then the other project, it's the pictures on the screen. So this is our old dairy, which is where our volunteers have their breaks, especially in the winter. It's very drafty. Missed some other bits out, but don't worry. And it's kind of, yeah, it's uninsulated, it's drafty, it's really cold in the winter. The volunteers have been kind of using portable heaters, and we want to try and make it more welcoming for them. And we also want to be able to host like older volunteers as well, because it's just too cold in the winter. So this grant, I applied for a development grant of £10,000, which was kind of the limit for a single building. And the idea is that that will pay for some of my time to write a fund. I want to apply to Veolia Landfill Trust. So the grant will pay for some of my time to do that bid, which is quite, there's a lot of work to apply for a landfill trust. It will also pay for some professional, like some time from a surveyor to sort of cost up all the works so that we can go on to apply for further funding. And it will provide the 10% match funding that we need for the Veolia Landfill Trust application. But we need to make sure that we've capped it at 25% of the capital costs. So the rest will go on like staff costs associated with that project. But yeah, there's lots of benefits in terms of like reduced carbon emissions, reduced energy bills, and then that means we can like better benefit the local community. And it will reduce our costs so we can put more towards our services. In terms of the application process, I thought it would be helpful to go through some of that. So there's an expression of interest form on the City Leap website, and then the Centre for Sustainable Energy, who's one of the partners, I presume, well, read your expression of interest and see if you're suitable, and then send you an email with the guidance. And there's different links for each funding stream. So you have to obviously decide which one you want to go for. There's a really helpful chart in the guidance, which I've printed out, which has all the funding streams and kind of all the eligible costs. So yeah, it's worth referring to that to make sure you're applying to the right stream. You can go back to the form as you're completing it, but I would really recommend working in Word, because the form did sort of lose some of my work a couple of times, but luckily I had a backup for most of it. But yeah, I found like CSE and the City Leap team have been really helpful in answering any questions that I had. And that's my cheesy photo that I did with the check, but James already showed you that. And then here's some lovely photos of baby animals from the farm. And so we've got a lamb from last year, I think. This is Clarence, the goat, who opened our new public bike pump a few weeks ago, me with one of our baby bunnies last summer, and my son with one of the guinea pigs. So I thought you might like to see them, but I'm happy to answer any questions if it's useful.
Wonderful. Thank you to you both for going through the presentations. Just been, yeah, really interesting, and yeah, to hear how it's worked for you both as well is brilliant. So thank you for that. Just looking in the chat, so we do have, unsurprisingly, a lot of love for Windmill Hill City Farm and the experiences that it's created for people and their children, and I'm definitely one of them as well, with my little one. So yes, lovely to see that. I'll kick it off with a question, if you don't mind, James. Just when you were going through the different grants, different kind of options,
yeah,
do you find that everyone starts within that micro stage, or do people come to you with maybe an idea that they feel is kind of, ready to go and kind of enters at that secondary point? How does it normally work?
It depends really. I mean, yeah, it's kind of dependent on the project and I suppose the organization. I think what I tend to see coming through with applications are there are a number of groups, I suppose, that have done energy projects before. So they've got a kind of a kernel of an idea that's perhaps a little bit more developed, and they know what's worked previously and what hasn't worked. So they oftentimes will skip the kind of micro grant and go straight into a small grant, which is absolutely fine. For kind of new organizations that haven't perhaps been able to engage fully in kind of energy projects in the past, I think it's a lot safer to kind of go down the micro grant route, just because yeah, I think there's a level of expertise maybe that's needed in terms of, doing a building survey or even a kind of study or kind of even, I guess, kind of taking a risk and putting some money into funding a staff member to do that work, which could be potentially quite high risk. So I'd say don't be afraid to kind of go down the micro grant route and then come back in, as I say, at a later stage once you've developed that idea.
Yes, fab. Thank you. Okay, we've some questions come through here. So, Kirsten, hi, Kirsten. We have a question just around what counts as Bristol. So, is it the City Council or BS postcode? Kirsten's about to start working for charity in Bath. So, does that fall outside of the boundaries?
It might do. It's kind of Greater Bristol, so it's the BS1 to BS16 postcode. So I think Bath would be, yeah, definitely outside of the remit, unless you've got any buildings in the BS16 side of things. I don't know.
Fab, thank you. And another one from Jenny. James, would projects promoting low carbon and sustainable travel qualify for the fund?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. If there's any kind of link, I suppose, to a carbon reduction effort there, that would be yeah. So we can do. We've had a few applications through for EV charge points, electric vehicle charging infrastructure on community sites, and yeah, some. I think there was a local charity as well this time around. So yeah, we can definitely do low carbon sustainable transport. Yeah.
Okay, fab, thank you. I'll just let if anyone has any other questions, feel free to pop them there in the chat box. I guess one thing from me, the it feels like quite a big world to look at. What would your advice be to someone who maybe, yeah, was kind of coming at this, thought they might have something, but they weren't 100% sure? Would it be to reach out to you guys, or how's best to kind of go about the next steps for anyone?
I think the best thing to do really in the early stages, we're happy to have a conversation and, really do within my team operate what we call like an open door policy with community organisations. So we get loads of people just popping in or calling in or emailing and whatnot. So happy to have a chat in the early stages. What I'd say, I suppose, in terms of the application process is when you first kind of go through onto our website, click the kind of the apply bit and it takes you through to the next form. There is a question on there which is, would you benefit from support with your application? So you can tick the yes or tick the no. If you'd like support, do tick the yes. There's no harm in that. And what will happen is then a colleague of ours from Bristol Energy Network will reach out and then start the process of supporting you through your application. And I think we offer up to 1 or 2 hours meeting support from Bristol Energy Network per application. So,
Nice. Okay, thank you. We've one hand up there, Sophie. You have a question?
Hi James.
yeah.
Can I just ask how have you described is the fund? I mean, if somebody applies, what is do you have like a current kind of success rate? 'Cause we're always talking kind of when people apply for trusts and grants, they're always like 10 success rate. How likely, going through the process, would a charity be successful in getting funding?
So I mean we've only done one round so far. So it's difficult to say. We've just had a look over the second round of applications that have come through, and at a glance, they all mostly look great. Um, yeah, and so I think a really strong chance, as long as it meets those kind of criteria that are set out sort of early on, there's no reason why we wouldn't. And I think the other thing to say is that we launched the fund a little bit later than we planned. So our intention is to deliver 1.5 million pounds worth of funding to community organisations by 2029. It's actually quite a lot of money, and it's going to take some doing. So read into that what you will.
Thank you very much. My next question was going to be, have you got any idea of how long this might be going on for? You talk about those rounds that are rolling, so that's really helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I think sorry, I missed a bit of that, I think, but I think the gist of it, yes. So we've got that commitment up to 2029, and at that point we kind of renew the commitment. So we're not quite sure what will go into the fund after that, but the likelihood is it will be, a similar amount or possibly even more for the next 5 years.
And Isabel, did you have something to add there?
I actually had a question for James as well. Um,
Okay.
you mentioned the Community Benefit Fund, the
hmm
2.8 billion. Can you tell us a bit more about that and when we might be able to apply for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, the Community Benefit Fund is very separate to this. It will have a whole different application process. But that's, yeah, the intention for the Community Benefit Fund is that it will be 2.8 million. And that really is to cover kind of projects that don't have an energy relation within them. So it could be anything that supports a local community to benefit. So it could be a children's play area, it could be a community garden, that sort of thing. We're looking to launch that. It's tied in a lot with our work around the Bristol Heat Network, to be plain. So we're looking to launch it sometime next year. I'll say Q2 to be safe, second quarter. But yeah, we'll do a big announcement and perhaps put something out around this group as well because there's another opportunity to benefit there.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, James. One question come through from Julie Cole. So can you recommend a specialist to hire, perhaps with a micro grant, who could advise them about a carbon net zero heating system for community buildings? So to put some examples, solar, which heating system, do they need increased investment from the national grid? That kind of thing.
Hmm. Thanks, Julie. That's a really good question. I mean, we can definitely advise as part of the application process, sort of people or organizations that have worked in that area. Wherever possible, I suppose, from our recommendation, we try to encourage and support the local supply chain. So if there's a local organization that can deliver that, I mean, it's not going to impact on your application, but I think it's just a generally good rule of thumb to have to support local organizations. So yeah, we can definitely do that. And our friends at Bristol Energy Network can give some pointers on all those technologies, definitely.
Fab. And then just to follow up there, whenever you were saying the deadline is in 6 months, does that mean that funding won't be made for another 6 months until after that closes?
Yeah, so we unfortunately we had a round close last Thursday, that opened up in, oh gosh, when was it? I think April. So we've been doing a big sort of push on promotions to get all of the applications in. That closed. We've got our panel on Tuesday, and then we do kind of all of the funding awards and funding agreements with those organisations that receive it. And then yeah, we kind of open a new window. So it will be, I think, yeah, it would mean that something would open up in the new year, I suppose, in terms of funding panel, perhaps March or April. And then the kind of funding would be awarded really soon after that panel. So we aim to kind of get the announcements out to organisations within a week of the decision being made. So quite quick.
Fab. Yeah, that is quick. Okay, wonderful. And a question from Graziella around how many funding rounds you plan to have, and when is the next round? So as you say, that next round will open up kind of, you thinking
Well, the next round's open already.
it is open.
So yeah, so as soon as one round closes, the next one opens up in terms of applications. But there is a lead time, I suppose, in terms of when the decisions are made, because we like to bunch them up into a group. So yeah, so that's kind of the next round. So there's no harm in getting an application in today, if you want to, or any time, kind of in the next kind of 4 months. How many rounds will we have? It really depends. So we're planning to get all of this funding out of the door by sort of the end of 2029. So as many as we can cram in, really. We may kind of review, I suppose, the frequency of them as time goes on, depending on how much funding is left, and I guess the sort of trickle of applications, whether they're coming in, I guess, quicker at the start of a period or more at the end. Yeah, kind of depends really. So but yeah, there's no limit really.
Okay, wonderful. And a follow-up from Graziella was just around, can an organisation have more than one active grant if it's for two buildings?
Yes, I mean it depends if they're on the same site. If they're on the same site, they could do a combined grant, could do a development grant for that one, or even potentially a loan, depending on how it's set up. If they're on separate sites, then yeah, absolutely. And much like Isabel's example, actually, there was, an example of one building and connections to other buildings as well. So yeah, it's entirely possible.
Okay, great. Isabel, do you have a question or anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say in response to Julie Cole's query about kind of which heating system, like just getting some advice about energy efficiency. We've had a number of different energy assessments done through different programs. So I don't know if anyone else has applied to the BCSE energy efficiency scheme that the government are running now. But as part of that, you can get an independent energy assessment where someone will come round and look at all your buildings on site and make recommendations. I can dig out the link if that's useful. And then we also had one done through the Centre for Sustainable Energy, where they kind of again went around to different buildings, looked at what insulation we would need, whether we could have another solar array. So it's quite a good starting point, I think, for organisations to see what areas they could go into with energy.
Thank you. And question from Alex.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the session. It was really interesting to hear about all of the work that you've been doing. I had one question and then I had a kind of smaller question and then a follow-up, which was a bigger question. So the smaller one is just to double check in terms of when the grants will be awarded. For the smallest grants, up to £1,000, will that still be awarded in March, April time?
Oh, no, that's a really good question, actually. So they're awarded kind of as and when. So it's kind of as soon as they come in, that's basically me, take a look at them, and then we'll kind of make a really quick decision on it and yeah, let you know kind of within weeks rather than having to wait for a panel that kind of goes through the larger kind of grants and loans. So yeah, that's really important. The idea is, as I say, is that it's kind of nimble, and very kind of quick and easy for you to access that immediate funding. Yeah.
Great. And then in terms of where the funding comes from, is some of it from the council or is it some of it from private? Would you be able to let us know?
Yeah, we get that one a lot. It's a good question. Yeah, so none of the funding is from the council. So this is all private sector funding. So my organisation, Amoresco, which is the primary partner with the council in Bristol City Leap, have contributed 750,000 for this particular round. And then Vattenfall, who are our sort of our subcontractor who look after the Bristol Heat Network, have also matched and put 750,000 in. So it's all private sector funding.
Oh, thank you. Alex, did you have another one or was it, have I made that up?
No, I just had two. I didn't have three.
I was waiting for a follow-up then.
I know, so was I. So there we go. The two. Thank you. Are there any other questions from anyone? If there are, feel free to pop them in the comments box or raise your hand. Oh, Sophie, you have one.
Hi, I'm sorry, James, you might have mentioned this earlier, and I haven't yet looked on the website for the details, but if somebody wants to have a conversation ahead of submitting anything, just to kind of talk through potential ideas and maybe on a longer scale in the next couple of years, we're hoping to do this. Are you the best person to contact, or is there a process to go through? Who do we speak to?
You can contact me. Yes, I've actually on the slides. There's a slide at the end which has got my contact details on it. So I think those will be circulated if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, absolutely happy to have an initial chat. And a couple of members of my team are kind of specialise in kind of community engagement as well. So yeah, we can kick it around between us.
Thanks very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Okay, fab. So, no more questions coming through at the moment. But yes, thank you so much to you both. That was just a really interesting session to run through both what it looks like and then as well what it's looked like also in practice for you and the plans that you have for the future. So, yeah, thank you both for taking the time to run this session with us today. It's been very useful. What we do then after this, so we will upload this onto our YouTube channel, so everyone can watch that again, and we've got James's details as well that we can circulate, and then you'll get a follow-up email just to fill in with a feedback form. You can just fill that out. It's kind of your chance to, I guess, shape what the future sessions look like, and we do really read through those and take the feedback on board, so we can shape those sessions and make them as useful for everyone as possible. So please do take a couple of minutes to fill that out if you can. And then we have our next event taking place on the 23rd of October. So we'll send some more information around about that afterwards as well. But just a big thank you. And I can see in the chat box, everyone is just saying thanks to you both for coming. So yeah, really useful session. And thank you all for your time today.